I mean, great. Okay. So, so today we'll start with the development of Spring applications. Hope everyone has gone through the last class record when I've discussed about the Maven tool and the various modules of Spring framework. Yeah. So now, in order to work with Spring framework, I'm going to use Spring Tool Suite. I'm going to use Spring Tool Suite. So this is one of the IDs. Okay, this is one of the IDs I can say. It's an ID Spring Tool Suite. So which is provided by Spring Framework. Sorry, Spring Source community. You got a community called a Spring Source. So this community, it is responsible for providing this STS. Actually, the Spring Framework is also from Spring Source community. Spring Framework is from Spring Source community actually. Yes. Here, this is the page from where you can download the Spring Tool Suite. It's an ID, Eclipse ID itself. Okay, it is an Eclipse ID itself. On top of Eclipse ID, the tools related to Spring are installed so that it helps us in developing Spring applications. Okay, to create Spring-based projects and all. So you'll find very good support in this tool. Here, once you're done downloading this STS, you can start working with it. You can just you can just extract it and you can start this STS. You see, I'll show you people. It's Eclipse ID itself. It's loading. Just a minute. Okay, you see, it's a Eclipse ID itself, but you'll find that you got some additional tools for Spring. That's it. So now let's start with Spring Core module. I'm going to develop a simple Spring application, a very basic Spring application. That means it's a Java application itself where we are going to use Spring framework. It's a Java application where we'll use Spring framework. Very basic application. Okay. So it's a kind of standalone itself. Okay. Not any web-based concepts. Just a minute, please. Yeah, sorry. So, you know, you'll find that to develop this application, I'm going to use Maven. Okay, I'll use Maven tool. Once again, I'm repeating, Maven is not specific to Spring framework. Actually, you can develop any type of application using Maven. It's a tool which helps us to create the project initially. Okay, building the project structures and all. Then it helps us to, you know, sorry, creating the project first of all, and then it helps us to, you know, acquire the dependencies. What are all the dependencies which are needed for that application? Dependencies, project dependencies, I can say, or we say Maven dependencies. That means the libraries needed for the application. So it is going to take care of it, and later on compiling, building the appropriate deployable files and all. So all such things can be taken care by Maven. Okay. Yes. So now in the Eclipse IDE or in the STS, everywhere by default you have the support for Maven. Okay. Yes. Everywhere you got very good support for Maven. So now I'm going to create a core application. That means where we'll use core module. So here, in order to create a Spring project, you see, you can use this wizard. You can use this wizard here. Okay. Spring project wizard. So Spring project wizard, select this wizard. Please make a note of it. So this is going to be a Maven based project. That means we are going to use this tool for creating the project. Only in project creation, managing the dependencies, Maven will help you. In the programming, will not use Maven. Okay. So you see, you'll get this window, project setup window. You see, just maximize it. Please maximize it. Always maximize it. Also, please, I'm stressing on this point. Please maximize it. Otherwise, you won't find this templates list. If you don't maximize, you won't find templates list here. Okay. Yeah. So you can give any project name. Let's say Spring Basic App. Already it is a basic project. Let's say. So this is what we'll do. Here now down you see you got templates. So if you just go through these templates, you'll find a simple Spring utility project. Okay, use this template called as simple Spring utility project here. Yes. So select this template. and you can select this template. Okay, so people who have just joined, so we are creating a Spring project here using this STS. You can download it from the official site. I'll give you the link. Already I guess I pasted it. I'll give it again. So here now you just make sure that you select this template simple Spring utility project and click on next. Once you click on next here, so it will ask you people to provide the package details, package structure. So what is the package structure you want to use in the application? So that package structure you need to specify here. Okay, fine. So let's say com.mtc.app. This is the package structure which I would like to use. I'll click on finish. So based on these details, you see, it's going to create a project here for us. A very basic Spring project here. Okay, yes. So once again, I'll show you people who have just joined. You, in order to create a Spring project, you see in the STS, you'll find this file new Spring project option. File new Spring project option. Okay. If you select it, you'll get this window. Maximize it, provide the project name, and then the templates. Select a simple Spring utility project template. This is the template, simple Spring utility project. So which you need to select. Okay, and you can just click on next and provide the package details. That's it. So let's have a look at this project now which you got here. You see, this is Maven based. Now, first of all, the main thing which you need to look at here is pom.xml file. POM stands for Project Object Model. Who uses this XML file? Can you people tell me? You see, you just select this pom.xml tab. Who uses this pom.xml file? Sorry, yeah, Maven. So your Maven is going to use this pom.xml file. So in this XML file itself, you'll provide the complete project details. You have the complete project details in this XML file. Yeah. So you see the group ID is specific to the Spring framework, which is the package details and all. Artifact ID, the project name. So packaging unit is jar. Name of the jar will be Spring utility. And mainly, you see, I want you people to concentrate on this properties now. What are properties? You know, in this XML file, you will find that you will declare variables. These properties are nothing but they are variables here. Properties are nothing but variables. Yes. Okay. So one variable is maven.test.failure.ignore. That is one property. It's a variable, and the other one is spring framework.version. It's another variable. Variables are user defined. The name of this properties can be anything you wish. Okay, the variables are user defined. The properties are user defined. So we got a values associated to it. You see, for that maven test failure ignore, what is the value? What is the value? It's simply true. You see, it's simply true. And for that spring framework dot version property, for this property, what is the value? 3.0.6 release. Okay, now throughout the application you can use that properties. For that for each property you got a value associated, right? Yes. Next, you got dependencies. So what are dependencies here? Dependencies means, as I told you people, they are nothing but the set of libraries or jars which are needed for this application. The set of libraries or jars. So first of all, in this project I need JUnit. So you see that it is by default it is adding a JUnit. So next, you got Spring Framework dependencies. The next thing is Spring Framework dependencies. Okay, this dependency. These are all the couple of dependencies which you got. They are very much specific to Spring Framework. So this values dependencies, they are standard. Yeah. Next, the last one is for log4j, for logging purpose. Log4j. Log4j is a framework generally which is used for logging. Yes, it is actually used for logging purpose actually. Yes. Okay. Now here we have this dependencies list. What Maven does, it will download all the dependencies from the appropriate location. It will download all the dependencies from the appropriate location here. Yes. Okay. Yes. Next, you got this plugins. What is this build a plugins? We don't need this. Okay, it is not at all needed. And just remove this. In older versions, we used to work with it, but not now. So now you know Maven what it does. It will add that list of jars. You see, you'll find that here in the project you'll find Maven dependencies. Under the Maven dependencies, you see these are all the jars or libraries which are needed for Spring Framework. Okay. Okay. So who added this jars? Your Maven itself. Earlier, you see, in case of struts and hibernate, uh, I've asked you people to download them explicitly from those official sites itself, right? But you see, now we don't need to do that. Even while creating struts or Hibernate application, if you use Maven, okay, and we can ask Maven to download that dependencies and all. It can also take care of those dependencies. Okay, yes, fine. Just a second. Yeah, you see, now let's go through this project structure here. First of all, you know, the main aim of showing you people of creating this project here is to demonstrate how to create a Spring project and how to use this templates which you got in this IDE, and you see, understand the Maven dependencies and all. Yes. Now, the next thing is you need to also know this Spring Beans, how to create the Spring Beans and configure them and load the container and work with it. Spring Beans. In the last class, I guess, I mean, from the first session of your Spring framework itself, I was talking about beans, Spring Beans. What are Spring Beans? So, Spring Bean means any Java object. Any Java object is called as a Spring Bean. Yes. But we need to configure it as a Spring Bean. That is also important. Let's see. Here, you know, we got an example. We got an example bean class which is by default created in this project here. You see, the sample example which is added. You see that wizard which we have used to create the project, it adds it by default. It's just a normal Java class which implements an interface called a service. This interface is also user defined. You see, it's a very simple interface called a service with the name service. Okay. Here in the service interface, we have this method getMessage which returns a string value. Now, that example service class, it implements the service interface, it implements that get method. Okay, get message method, it returns that string, that's it. Okay. Now, most important thing is how to make it a Spring Bean. Use this annotation @component. Use that annotation @component. You know that component annotation is from Spring framework, which indicates that this class is a Spring Bean class. What is the specialty of Spring Bean? Can you people tell me? Just a minute. Just a minute. Sorry, guys. So, what is specialty about spring bean? Can you people tell me? Difference between a normal Java object and a spring bean. Does it make any difference really? I guess I mentioned it. You know, the life cycle of the spring beans is actually managed by the spring container. Yeah, I guess, yes, definitely I mentioned it in the last class also. So spring container is responsible for managing the life cycle of the spring beans. Okay. When I say life cycle management, that means it includes instantiating the bean, initializing the bean, placing the bean into service and destroying the bean. Apart from lifecycle management, the spring container provides another service to this spring beans. What is it? For spring beans, another service is provided. What is it? Dependency injection. Very good. That's right, exactly. Okay. Dependency injection. So this is one of the services, but we'll discuss about it later on. Okay. So now here we can configure an ID for this bean. Let's say example service. Okay. So you can configure an ID. So when the container instantiates this bean class, it will configure the ID example service. We can supply that ID. That's it. Okay. Next, now I'm going to show you people a configuration file. You see, in the resources file, you have a folder called as resources. Okay. In the sorry, in the resources folder, you'll find meta-inf. Under the meta-inf, you have the spring folder. Under that, you see, you'll find this app context XML file. Okay, I'll open this file. So this is called as a Spring Bean configuration file. Please make a note of it if you want. Spring Bean configuration file. You know, you will find that this configuration file, your container will load it, read it. Who will read this configuration file? Your Spring container will read it. Okay. So Spring container is responsible for reading this configuration file. Okay. Yes. You know, as of now, I've configured that Spring Bean using annotations, right? But we can also configure that Spring Bean using XML also. That is another option we got. I'll show you that option also. We'll see how to configure the bean using XML. Yeah. Next, you know, in the Spring Bean configuration file, you'll find that we have this element added component scan, and we got an attribute base package which refers to a package here com.mtc.app. What does that means? You know, you'll find that using this component scan annotation, we are asking the container to scan for the spring beans in that package. Okay, using this component scan element, we are asking the container to scan for this, to scan for the spring beans in that package. So when the container loads, it reads this configuration file and understands where exactly we have defined the spring beans, in which package you have those beans. Okay, fine. Now we got everything in place. Hope you people got it. Now what we need to understand is how to load that spring container mm, and how to you know ask for the spring beans here. How to ask for the beans. Yes. How to load the container and how to ask the container to provide the beans which you need. Yes. Let's see. Now I'm going to define a class here for that purpose. I'll call it as test. I'll add a main method to it. It's a very basic project as I told you people. You see, I'm going to write the code to load that container. And you see, while loading this container, we need to ask the container to, we need to supply that Spring main configuration files details here. We need to supply that configuration file details to the container. How? Let's see. It is in the Metain folder. In the Metain folder, you got a Spring folder. In that Spring folder, you have this file, the name app context.xml. You know this class path application, class path XML application context. It helps us to load that Spring Bean configuration file from the class path, and then load that container, Spring container here. Yes. So once that container is loaded, this object class path XML class path object will be created. You'll get that object reference here. I can say you're going to get that object reference. So this application context now, I can say that it refers to that container. Okay. Yes. So this is how you load the container pragmatically. Okay. Please make a note of it. So hope you people have made a note of it. Yes. Next, how do we ask the container to provide that bean reference? How do we ask the container to provide bean reference? Let's see that. Now I need that example service bean object. Okay. Yeah. Just a second. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Now you see, I want to use that example service bean. You see, in that example service bean, we got a method, right? We got the example service method, right? I would like to use that method, example service bean method, get message. That method name is get message, right? I would like to use that method here. Yes. So what to do? That means first of all, you need that bean reference. And as I told you people in Spring, the container itself is responsible for managing the life cycle of this beans. So we have configured it as a bean. Now here, you see the container itself is going to help us in this regard. So let's see, let's ask the container to provide that example service bean reference. Okay. So application context dot get bean example service. Okay. So through this method, you'll ask the container to provide the bean reference. Here, to this method, you'll pass the ID of that bean. So what is the bean ID? So example service is the bean ID. That is the bean ID of that bean. While configuring the bean, using that component annotation, we have provided ID, right? We have assigned ID. So that is that ID. Okay. Yes. That's it. So container, what it does, now it will take that bean ID, it will instantiate that bean whose ID we have supplied. See, while configuring the bean, we have provided the ID, right? And it returns that bean reference here. You see, you'll get that bean reference. Actually, you don't need to cast it. So there is another option. What you can do is you can supply that class name directly. Yes. Okay. So now let's use that reference to call that method. Example service method get message. So this method returns a string value. We'll try to print it. This method, it returns a string value. We'll try to print it. That is what we'll try to do here. Okay. Just a sec. Yeah. So let's run this code. Now how it works, I'll explain it once the flow. So of course the program starts execution from this method itself. Your program, it starts execution from this method itself, from the main method. So first of all, in the main method we have written this code. So we are trying to instantiate, we are trying to load the container, I can say. So this code, what it does, basically it loads that container. Yes. So after the container is loaded, after the container is loaded, you know, you'll get that reference to that container, which is stored in this application context reference variable. Next, you know, we'll call this method getBean. So why you are calling this getBean method? To obtain that, to request the container to provide that bean reference. Which bean? So the bean ID, you are supplying it. The bean ID, you're supplying it here. So which bean you want to fetch, which bean reference you want, that bean ID you're supplying it here. And also that bean type also, that class details also, you can provide it. Yes. So now you see the container will instantiate that bean, provides that bean object reference. Now you can use that bean reference and call the methods appropriately. That's it. And one more important point here, you see when the container loads, you see the container will read this configuration file. So you're supplying a configuration file name here, right? So when the container loads, first of all, it will definitely read that configuration file. And it understands where we have configured the beans. Let's run this code. Okay. Now you see this output here, and you got that log information. You will slowly understand that log information. But first of all, you see that method is called, which returns that string message, so which you're able to display. So is it clear for you people what we did now? Any questions in this regard, please let me know. So any questions? Now at this point of time, still you might be wondering what is the advantage of this framework, or what is the advantage of using the container and all. But soon we'll unfold them. Okay, definitely when we dig into the details, we'll understand it better. And we are not yet we haven't completely explored all the features of Spring Framework. It's just a beginning. Okay, yeah. So please let me know if you got any questions. No? Yes. Okay.
Hi, Mesh, I have one question.
Yeah.
So how the mapping has done, like how the example service object get through the
Yeah.
application context?
Based on that ID, as I told you people, so you're supplying that bean ID. So there is a bean which is configured with that ID here.
Okay.
Okay.
And how the XML files can it?
Yeah, you see, we are supplying that file details here. Already, I've also mentioned it. You're supplying that XML file while you are loading the container. To the container, you're supplying this details, file details. So container reads that configuration file and understands where we have configured that Spring Beans.
Okay, but we
So
didn't define anything about the
that package,
sample service.
that package, in the XML file, you have that package details in which you have that Spring Bean com.mtc.app. So that example service is in that package. And component notation, it indicates that it's a Spring Bean here. Yes. So container will look for the beans based on that annotation. Yes. Okay, now let's move on. Here, let's talk about the other important service which is provided by the container, that is dependency injection. So let's see how this dependency injection works here. So when we talk about the dependency injection, yes, as I told you people in the last class. So first of all, you need to understand this term dependency. So can you people just recollect and tell me what is a dependency? What do we mean by dependency? Yes, dependency means yes, that's right. Dependency is an object which is needed. Dependency is an object which is needed for another object to accomplish a task or a goal. Yes. Okay. So you'll find that in the applications, always objects they collaborate with each other to accomplish a task or a goal. One object, it may take the help of one or more than one object. So you see that objects, what are all the objects which are needed for this object to accomplish a task or a goal, those objects are called as dependencies. You can call them as dependencies here. Yes. Fine. Dependency injection means supplying the dependencies which are needed for a particular object. Supplying the dependencies which are needed for a particular object. Okay. Yes. So you'll find that in Spring Container, in Spring Framework, the container itself is responsible for supplying the dependencies which are needed for a particular object. The Spring container will supply the dependencies which are needed for a particular object. Okay. Yes. Here, let me show you people with an example. I'll demonstrate it with an example. For suppose, as of now, you see, if you consider this example service method get message. Okay. As of now, this message here, the string message is hard coded. Yes. Okay. As of now, this message is hard coded. So what I want to do is, instead of hard coding this message, let's say for example, just assume it's only an assumption. Let's assume that here we'll fetch it from the database server. I would like to fetch it from the database server. So for that, what I'll do is, let's say I will add a DO here. Okay, let's do one thing. We'll add a DO class. So we'll call it as message service or message DO, let's say. Just assume that. So this DO, it is going to fetch the record, fetch that message from the database server. Let's say it helps the example service to fetch that message from the database server, let's say. It's just a dumb DO. Okay, it's not going to be real DO. It won't really interact with the database server and fetch the messages. Just assume. Yeah. If I have to show you people DB interactions and all, now it becomes little complicated here at this point of time. But definitely we'll see DB interactions will develop real DOs. So in the next session itself, we'll do that. Generally, when we do develop a DO, so it's a practice to also define an interface and define the contract for the DO. That means what methods it has to implement, right? Let's say get message or fetch message. Let's say this is the method. Let's say I want the DO to implement this method, fetch message. Okay, fine. So I'll make that DO class implements this interface, message DO. We'll implement this method, fetch message, and I'll return the message. Let's say db, let's say hello world. That's it, db message, let's say. So this is from database, just a prefix. Okay, here Now the message DO, I can say that it is going to help the example service to fetch that message from the database. Let's say, just assume, okay, we are not really interacting with the database server, but just assume, okay, for time being, that it is interacting with the database server here. Yes. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll add that reference, that interface type here, message DO, message DO. I'll tell you why I'm adding that interface type. Now into this reference variable message DO, we can store that message DO class object reference. You know that. We can store that message DO class object reference. Yes. Okay. You see here, example service uses message DO to fetch the message, right? So you see, let's say it will call that method, message DO's method fetch message, to fetch that record from the database, let's say. So what is message DO for example service here? In this context, what is message DO for example service? Yes. It's just association. No, it's more than that. Dependency, that's right. Exactly. So I can say that message DO is a dependency for the example service. Message DO is a dependency for the example service here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's a dependency. So if it's a dependency, that means the container itself will supply the dependency. The container itself is responsible for supplying the dependency, right? So that means, you see, I won't write the code to acquire that message DO object here. I will not write the code to acquire the message DO object reference. So we'll leave it to the container itself. So container itself is going to obtain that dependency. Okay. Yes. But you know what? Here, if you want the container to supply that dependency, we need to configure the dependency details. We need to also configure the dependency details here. So just add this annotation on top of this property. Okay. Yes. Add that annotation auto void on top of that property here. So that annotation auto void on top of that property, it indicates that message DO is a dependency. The property represents a dependency which is needed for this example service. So container reads this configuration details. Okay. So container understands that it has to supply the message DO bean reference. Okay. Yes. Container will supply it. So let's see. This is the first time we are looking at such feature, the dependency injection here, right? Yeah. So the creation of objects here. Now creating that object, the dependency is taken care by the container itself. Yes. Okay. So for suppose here, if everything goes fine, so that fetch message method will be called. It returns a message. In turn, that message you will find that this method will return it to the calling method, whichever method is calling this get message method. To that method, it will return that string message which is written by that fetch message method here. That's it. Okay. For suppose, what if the container fails to inject the dependency? That means if it fails to supply that message to your bean reference, so what will be the output? What will be the result? What do you think? What if the container fails to inject the dependency? So what will be the result? If I run this code, then what will be the result? No, in that case, the reference will be null, right? That message to your reference variable holds null reference. So on the null reference, if you are calling a method, then what happens? You'll get null pointer exception, right? You'll get null pointer exception. So that is what is going to happen here. Yes. Okay. But it won't be the case here. So container will inject the dependency. Let's run this code. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll tell you. There is one issue. So, okay, we got an exception. I'll tell you the reason for that exception. You know, I've created a new DO, right? First of all, I didn't configure it as a bean. So container is a, if you didn't configure it as a bean, it won't identify this bean at all. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. So let's configure it as a bean here at the rate component. Sorry, I'll configure this bean ID as message do. Yes. So now, first of all, I'll run this code and then I'll explain it. Okay, how it works. You see, you got that message, DB message, hello world. So definitely, you see, that do method is called here, right? The do method is invoked. Fine. Now, one thing which you might be wondering here, how the container will understand that it needs that message do bean object reference. How the container will understand that the example service need bean needs message do bean class object reference. Yes. Okay. You see, that property name is the key. In case of auto wiring, the property name, it plays a key role here, I can say. Property name plays a key role. You know what the container does? So we have configured this auto wire, right? We are using this auto wire, which indicates that the container is supposed to supply that reference to this property. Property name is message to you. You know what the container does? The container will search for the bean whose ID is message do, whose ID is message do in this application context. That means in this application, it will search for the bean whose ID is message do. So is there any bean whose ID is message do? Is there any bean whose ID is message do? Yes, we got a bean whose ID is message do. We have configured it, right? You see, on top of this message do class, so we have added that annotation at the rate component, which indicates that this is a bean, and in that brackets, we have specified that bean ID. I can say that message do is nothing but the bean ID itself. Okay. Yes. So hope you people got it. That message do is nothing but the bean ID itself. Yes. Okay. So the container, what it does, it will instantiate this bean class and will supply that bean reference. It will store that bean reference into this property message do. When it is going to do this, what do you people think? When the container will inject this dependency, Okay. Yep. So now you may ask me a question. What if this property name and that bean ID doesn't match? For suppose the property name is message drf. Then you see, now there is no bean whose ID is message drf. We got a bean whose ID is message do, right? We got a bean whose ID is message do, but not message drf. Now what happens? You know, I'm sorry to disappoint you people, but it won't throw null pointer exception. So it got another strategy here. So it actually follows another strategy to inject the dependency. So if it fails to find, if the container here, you know what, if it fails to find a dependency based on the property name, okay, the container based on the property name, if it fails to find the dependency, then what it does is here, it will search for the dependency based on the property type, based on the property type. Yes. So this property is what type here? Yes. This property is what type? It's a interface type. I messaged you interface type here, right? Yes. So this property is interface type. So you know what, here the container, this time it will search for the dependency based on that property type, that is interface type here. It will search for the dependency based on that property type, that is interface type. I message Dio. Okay. Yes. So is there any bean you know, which is of that interface type? I can say yes, of course. You see this message Dio bean class here, it is of that interface type itself. Message Dio class, it is that interface type itself, right? Okay. So still I can say that the container finds the dependency, so it injects it. So there won't be any problem. You see, I'll run this code. You see, still it works. So there are two different strategies the container uses to search for the dependencies. One is based on the property name. It will search for the dependency. The other one is based on the property type. Yes. So is it clear for everyone? Okay, good. Now I have a question. What is the advantage of this dependency injection here? Is there any real advantage for this dependency injection concept? Yes. What is the advantage of using the dependency injection concept? Yes. What is the advantage of dependency injection? You know, first of all, you see from the developer's perspective, if we think about it from the developer's perspective, see from our side, you'll find that we don't need to really manage this dependencies now, right? We don't need to write the code, require the dependencies and release them and all. So writing this dependency code and all is very much redundant, right? It's always an overhead for us, you know that most common code. Now it is taken care by the container. But you know there is another important advantage of using dependency injection. So dependency injection concept, it helps us to create the beans which are loosely coupled. Dependency injection concept here, it is going to help us to develop the beans which are loosely coupled. Yes, helps us to develop the beans which are loosely coupled. Yes. So what does that means? Why do we need beans which are loosely coupled? Okay. So now what does that means exactly? That you need to understand, right? I can say that two beans are loosely coupled if change in one bean does not affect the other bean here. If change in one bean, if it does not affect the other bean, then I can say that the beans are loosely coupled. Okay, so how it is going to be an advantage if the beans are loosely coupled? What exactly does that means? I'm saying that change in the dependency. For example, if you got two beans, in our case itself, let's you if you consider this example service and a message DO. Message DO is a dependency for example service, you know that. So here you see these two beans, if I say they are loosely coupled, that means it indicates that the change in the dependency, that means change in the message DO, will not affect the example service bean. It should not affect the example service bean. Okay, or in other words, I can say that change in the dependency, change in the dependency should not affect the dependent bean. That means if you modify that dependency, we need not modify the dependent bean here. Yes. If that is the case, then I can say that these two beans are loosely coupled. Now let's see whether our beans are loosely coupled or not. Actually, by default, if you use dependency injection concept, I cannot say that the beans are loosely coupled. Okay, by default, if we use dependency injection concept, I can't say that they are loosely coupled. Okay, yes. So let's see. For suppose now you got this message DO, right? Here I'm using JDBC in this message DO, let's say. So here, this message DO which you got here, let's say it uses JDBC. Message DO which uses JDBC, let's say. Yes. Okay. Just assume. Now we have developed a message DO which uses JDBC, and you see here that example service is using this message DO, and you provided this message DO and example service to your client. Just assume that you provided it to your clients. Initially, your clients have used it, but later on, let's say your clients have asked you people to use Hibernate in the message DOs. That means in the DOs, they've asked you people to use Hibernate instead of JDBC. So your client came to know that Hibernate is far more effective and efficient compared to JDBC. So someone has explained the advantages of using Hibernate with your client. So your client wants you to use Hibernate. So what you are going to do in this case, what you're going to do, it's very simple. What you can do is, okay, you can just leave this existing bean like this. Now you can create a new bean class, message do heap, which implements that interface iMessage do. Okay, now here let's say this message do heap uses Hibernate. Using Hibernate. Okay, say hello world. Now we can develop a DO this way. Now only thing is here, we need to ask the container to inject this dependency. Okay, here I'll configure this bean as a this class is a Spring Bean. Say I will assign this ID message DO here. Okay, yes. You see, now we have two beans. One is message DO, the other one is message DO heap. Now one of the bean ID is message DO, which matches that property name. Am I right? It matches the property name. You see? Okay, I'll make sure that this property name it matches it, or else you know initially itself. Let's say we have this property name message DO. Now see here, what we can do is now we can simply configure that bean, make sure that that bean ID is same as this property name. So the other bean, now you can remove it from the service or you can just comment it. Just comment the other bean. That's it. Now the other bean is commented, so it is not used anymore. Now the container, what it does this time, so it will inject this new bean into that example service. You see, change in the dependency is not going to affect the example service here. Change in the dependency will not affect that example service. Yes. Okay. It is not affecting. You got this point, all of you. Here, we don't need to change message to you. We've changed the property name. Let's say initially the property name is message to you. Let's say we'll retain it like that, just to show you people that demonstrate that dependency injection strategies. I just changed it. Let's say the property name is message to you. From the beginning, it is message to itself. Okay. So that's it. Now the container will inject that new bean, that message to you here. You see, it is very easy to switch the dependencies, right? Now you will find that the container injects that message to you using Hibernate here, the new bean. So, of course, this is an advantage, right? So I can say that now these two beans are loosely coupled. So we can easily switch the dependencies or implementations for that particular message to you. Yes. For suppose I want the container to use the other bean, I'll configure this bean and you say I'll comment this bean. That's it. This time the container will inject that bean whose ID is bean which is a message to your JDBC. Message to your bean which is a JDBC. This is the old bean. That's it. So this is only possible, you know what? This is only possible here because in the example service class, have you noticed it? The property type is interface type. That means now into this reference variable message do, we can inject a bean, any bean class reference. We can inject any bean class reference which implements that interface. Okay, so whichever class implements that interface here, iMessageDO, that reference, that bean class reference, you can store it in this message.do reference variable here, right? It's interface type. So this interface now it can take any class object reference which implements that interface. So through that interface, now we are able to achieve this loose coupling here. Not only interface but dependency injection also. Both dependency injection and that interface concept together using together, if you are able to use them, you'll find that you'll have this advantage. Okay, what if that reference variable type is not interface type, if it is a specific class type? In that case, I can't say that the beans are loosely coupled. See, for example, it is class type, something like this message do. You know, there is a bean class called as message do, right? This time, you see this property message do which you got here, it can only take the bean reference of type message do class. That's it. The other message do bean class reference you cannot inject it. That is also an important point which you need to understand. Okay. Yes. So because the reference variable type was interface type, earlier it was possible to inject any bean which implements that interface. But this time you see into this reference variable message do, you can only store the bean which is of type message do class. Only message do class because the reference variable is class type, a particular class type. So is it clear for you people? So you'll find plenty of such examples later on. As of now, you see this is just a beginning, but let me know if you got any questions. Now in this case, I can't say that the dependency message do and the example service are loosely coupled. In this context, I can say that they are tightly coupled here. Yes, because if you change the dependency, if you want to switch or if you want to use a different dependency, now you have to change this example service bean class code also, right? You have to modify this example bean class. Without modifying the example bean class, you cannot switch the dependencies here. Yes, you cannot use a different dependency. Hope you got it. That reference variable type, you have to change it here. So, any questions? Okay, good. So now we have to go through many other things. We'll dig into more details of this dependency injection and all. So for so far, whatever we have discussed, just go through it. Okay, try to practice it. So we'll meet tomorrow again at our regular time. We'll continue discussion. Okay. Yes. So in the next class, we'll uh, we'll see more of this, and you'll find that we'll be interacting with the database. So I guess tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I'm going to start with it. So where you'll see real DOs, where you'll find more advantages and all. Yeah. Okay. That's all for today then. Thank